Hello and welcome to this 360-degree virtual reality video which is bringing you around the Ards Peninsula and North Down in County Down. We're going to be tracing the history of Ulster-Scots settlers in this area, thinking about their stories and their heritage and their culture. Now the scene that you're looking at around us here has been captured in 360 degrees, and that means that you can use your mouse at home or a VR headset to look all around you. And today we're standing where this beautiful little stream is trickling out into the Irish Sea. This is called the Ganaway Burn, and burn is the Ulster-Scots word for a small river. Take a little look now to my left and you'll see a map showing you exactly where we're located. So from here you can look along the coastline. This is the coastline, the east side of the Ards Peninsula. You can look inland over the rolling green fields, or you can look out there across the Irish Sea, and in the far distance on the horizon you can maybe just about make out Scotland. I can see it over there myself through the clouds. This was a very attractive area for the Scottish settlers who came here with their landlord, the Scottish Laird, Sir James Hamilton, in the early 1600s. They were within sight of home, and this beautiful place with access to the sea, the rich farmland and glorious sunrises made this a lovely home. Their landlord, Sir James Hamilton, had settled this area with tenants who would be loyal to the king, who would pay him rent, who would speak English, and who would establish Protestantism in this area. Now, if you look to my right, you'll see a portrait of Sir James Hamilton, the landlord of that time. So, Sir James Hamilton's settlement then at the nearby town of Ballywalter was a success. By 1661, it had 24 thatched cottages. It had a slate quarry, and it had a small creek where boats could come in and out. The Ulster-Scots settlers got well established. They built their cottages, they fished and they farmed, they grew flax, they thrived really, living here as part of a small community, still very much connected to their Scottish roots, still very much a part of that Scottish tradition with its folklore, its superstitions and its language. And down here, particularly in the Ards Peninsula, that Scots language flourished. In fact, there was one man living in a townland called Dunover, D-U-N-O-V-E-R, a townland just not far from here, who wrote beautiful poetry using that Ulster-Scots tongue. His name was Andrew McKenzie, known as the Bard of Dunover, and he was born in 1780. At the age of 30, he published the first ever single author book of Ulster-Scots poetry. He'd been writing under the pseudonym Philip McClabber, and with the encouragement of his friends, he now brought out a book of poetry. If you look to my left, you'll see an image of Andrew McKenzie and also a photograph or an image of the front of that book which he brought out in 1810. Now, one of Andrew Mackenzie's poems was called the Ganaway Burn. This is the Ganaway Burn here, this lovely little stream trickling out into the sea. He wrote this poem at a time later in life when he was far from here, when he was living in Belfast in poverty. And up there in the city with the river Lagan and all of the big merchant vessels, he was reflecting on this little stream and wishing that he was close to home. So I'm going to read you a little extract now, and you'll hear me reading this in the beautiful Ulster-Scots vernacular tongue of the Ards Peninsula. So this is an extract from the Ganaway Burn. Aye, dear native streamlet, wherever I wander, though nature's beauties afore me were spread, thou comest o'er my soul wi' a feeling sae tender, that back to thy margin my fancy is led. Thou early kenned objects by memory hallowed, awake recollection wherever I turn. For nature's rude dictates I carelessly followed among the rich vales o' the Ganaway Burn. Isn't that lovely? Inspired all those hundreds of years ago. Many of Andrew Mackenzie's friends wanted him to write epitaphs or verses for the gravestones of their loved ones. And just a couple of miles south from here at the old Whitkirk Cemetery, we can find some gravestones with his lines on them. So we're going to leave the Ganaway Burn now and head further south towards the village of Ballywalter to learn a little bit more. Our next stop on this tour has brought us to the most beautiful, tranquil location. We're in the townland of Whitechurch, which would be known in Ulster-Scots as Whitkirk. And when the Ulster-Scots settlers of the 17th century arrived here, they would be able to worship in this historical place where there has been a church since the year 1306. If you look behind you, you can still see some of the old stone walls of Whitkirk, and the early Presbyterians of the 17th century would have worshipped behind these walls under a thatched roof. And all around us, you can see these higgledy-piggledy gravestones, many of them containing Ulster-Scots surnames. These mark the burial place of settlers in this area over the centuries. One of the oldest stones is the last resting place of John Cooper. Now, this is a story. John Cooper died in the year 1608. He had emigrated from Scotland to Ulster in 1606. Now, when he died, he was 90 years old. So that means that John Cooper was born in 1518 and left his home in Scotland to come to Ulster when he was 88 years old. That man must have seen some fabulous periods of our history. For another interesting Ulster-Scots gravestone, look to my left and you can see a photograph of the headstone of Robert Tate. Let me read you the inscription. It says, "Here lieth ye body of Robert Tate, who departed this life July ye 31st, 1712, aged 65 years. So Robert Tate would have been born in 1647 and he would have been one of these early Ulster-Scots settlers. Almost 2 centuries after the dawn of the Ulster-Scots, a rebellion broke out across Ireland. Many of the Ulster-Scots Presbyterians of North Down in the Ards Peninsula joined the Society of United Irishmen, which wanted to bring about liberty, equality, fraternity amongst Catholic, Protestant and Dissenter. Very often, particularly in this area, they were led by their Presbyterian ministers, and in fact, the minister of Ballywalter, the Reverend Robert Gowdy, was hanged for his part in the insurrection in July 1798. Just 1 week later, men from this area marched to Newtownards, where a battle took place. There were 9 people killed on that occasion and 13 injured. If you look to my right, you can see a photograph of the gravestone of James Kane. James Kane was killed as part of the 1798 rebellion. Just in front of me, this large, long, flat gravestone commemorates 2 brothers, David and Hugh Maxwell. They also lost their lives during the 1798 rebellion at Newtownards. Written on the stone here, or etched in the stone, is a little verse. This could have been written possibly by Andrew McKenzie, who we met when we were at Ganaway Burn. Let me read it for you. Lo, Erin's genius, hovering o'er this tomb, wi' mournful eye surveys the hallowed sod, where sleep her bravest sons in earth's womb. Tears fall, hope whispers, cease, they dwell wi' God. This is a really beautiful old graveyard where you could spend a happy afternoon wandering amongst the headstones, looking at all the old inscriptions and reading those Ulster-Scots names and epitaphs. Maybe you'll be inspired to come and have a look round here at Whitkirk yourself sometime, or continue now to enjoy some more episodes in our Ulster-Scots series.